discussing Obama and Obamacare. And with us from Washington, Josh Kraushaar is with us from the National Journal Hotline. Here in the studio, Jean-Jacques Zombrowski, economist who teaches at Paris's Descartes University, and with a panel of, is it just Frenchmen or also other Europeans?
Other Europeans.
Other Europeans. You've been advising the U.S. Health Department on how to implement all this. Now, we have with us, joining us now, two gentlemen who don't just meet on television sets. We have Forrest Alogna and Kate Kushner, who work in the same Paris law firm. Forrest, who is a Democrat, and Kate, who is a Republican. Welcome to both you gentlemen. I guess before we resume, you guys surprised as Josh Kraushaar was mentioning at the top of the hour how it confounded all the pundits in Washington, this 5-4 ruling. Were you guys surprised?
Absolutely. As sounds like was already mentioned, the smart money was very much predicting that this would go down. We're just delighted at this positive result coming out of the court today.
Kate Kushner?
I was very surprised and disappointed. I thought that the court was finally going to start enforcing the text of the Constitution, but today was not the day for that.
Why did Justice Roberts side with the moderates on this one?
Unfortunately, I've just gotten off a train and I haven't
and
had
a traffic jam.
And a traffic jam, so I haven't had a chance to read the opinion. But I think he was trying to avoid a confrontation and trying to rule in the narrowest possible way that he could do so without.
In the ruling, and Josh will correct me if I'm wrong on this. He said that the individual mandate, that thing that forces everybody to basically get insurance, pay for insurance, or else face some kind of a fine, that as long as you label it a tax, then Congress has the right to do it. Is that that's sort of an interesting remark on his part?
Well, I mean, part of it is that the, I guess, conservative, idea of rolling back federal power has been centered around the Commerce Clause, as I'm sure you're aware. There are limits to the federal tax power, but it's something people have been a lot less focused on. So I think, he probably felt that it would be less controversial to say, "Hey, this is okay as a tax."
And you get to the heart of what we're what we're just getting to, which is really part of the reason why it's unpopular is, well, people being suspicious of the size of the federal government. Like this garage owner in Morristown, New Jersey, who was asked just a few days ago what he thought of Obamacare.
We should control our own destiny. The consumer should have more say. That when the government gets involved, the expectation that it's somehow going to get better, as independent businessmen, we question that.
Josh Kraushaar, really, you've made a move, it seems, today, tell me if I'm wrong, towards becoming a European-style social democracy, where if the federal government is now in charge of making sure everybody has health care. Is a national curriculum for education next?
Well, that's where the Roberts ruling is quite fascinating, and I think it deserves a full reading, because what I think Roberts did was he basically said the healthcare law is constitutional under a tax system, but when it comes to future significant legislation down the pike for years and years to come, that the Supreme he's set a precedent that could potentially overrule or render unconstitutional other sizable pieces of legislation that could move the United States in that direction towards more of a European social democracy. So I think Roberts was playing the long game here, and I think if you read a lot of conservatives initially were very upset about the opinion, but in looking at the long-term implications, I think he may have set a particularly powerful precedent that could restrict the Commerce Clause being used in future Supreme Court rulings, and even give some political power to the Republican argument that as a tax, that's a very politically potent issue for Republicans and for Mitt Romney to use in the November election. So on the narrow, obviously it was a big loss for those who were looking to see the healthcare law overturned, but there may be some long-term benefits that Roberts has laid out here in this ruling.
So in other words, Forrest Alogna, do you agree he may be dropping a hint to the Republicans on how they can contain the size of government?
Yeah, I think
he even said
this is.
Go ahead, Josh Kraushaar.
Well, and just quickly, he even said in the ruling that he wasn't making any judgment on the policy. He was implying that he may not be in favor at all of the policy. He was just ruling on the narrow legal merits and the constitutionality of the law.
For Sonia.
This is one of the most politicized courts that we've seen in generations. And there's no question that since Bush v. Gore, the court has gotten a taste of playing politics, and they've been running with it ever since. There's no question at all that Roberts is playing the long game, and I think that also goes to why this election is so crucial in terms of the additional Supreme Court justices who are going to be appointed in the future. It's absolutely, there are a number that are going to come up during the next 4 years, and it's, you know, if the Democrats can get in there and continue to name some additional justices, we can keep remaining in the first world and having things just like we enjoy in the rest of the first world, like health care for everyone.
All right, so for you, it's healthcare for everyone. For you, it's about the size of the government. Just a final word on this issue of the size of the government. It's something hammered home by Mitt Romney when he spoke just after the announcement this Thursday by the U.S. Supreme Court.
You can choose whether you want to have a larger and larger government, more and more intrusive in your life, separating you and your doctor, whether you're comfortable with more deficits, higher debt that we pass on to the coming generations, whether you're willing to have the government put in place a plan that potentially causes you to lose the insurance that you like, or whether instead you want to return to a time when the American people will have their own choice in health care, where consumers will be able to make their choices as to what kind of health insurance they want.
Yeah, and to you.
Josh Kraushaar, how will that argument ring in the fall with voters, as you were mentioning in part one, about galvanizing the base and also the independent voters?
Right. Well, that's the argument you're going to be hearing Romney make throughout the campaign. And I think the key question, and I think this is the X factor politically in the decision, I think there's a chance, and it's only a chance, but there's a chance that among the independent voters, this ruling and Roberts' stamp of approval on the healthcare law could actually push them to support the law and actually to view it more politically favorably. There've been a lot of divisive and contentious Supreme Court decisions, none more notable than the Bush-Gore decision in 2000, when the Supreme Court ruled essentially put George W. Bush in office. But as tense and as angry as a lot of people were, there was generally a consensus that emerged right after the decision, even when people disagreed with it. So I think the big question with this is, does this kind of tone down the temperature among those independent voters? Do they kind of look at, they may have had questions about the law, but if John Roberts gave his approval of the law, will they start to think will they start to view the law more positively? So I think it's very important in the next couple of weeks to look at the opinion polls to see if that public opinion moves in the Democrats' direction. If it doesn't, I think it's a big warning sign.
And by the way, it was 6 short years ago that the then governor of Massachusetts was shaking hands with Senator Ted Kennedy at a ceremony in Boston, passing universal health care coverage in his state. There, Mitt Romney, you see a slightly younger man in those images. By virtue of the fact that he did pass such a bill in his home state, do you feel, Kate Kushner, that this is an issue that maybe he won't be going to a lot in the home stretch of the presidential election?
It's a good question. He may not be the best messenger on this particular issue, unfortunately. But I think he will reap some benefits as people start to think twice about the size of the government and where it's going and what it can require you to do with the current court. And I think that hopefully, this will lead to a different composition in the court in the future, indirectly. I think he is committed. Romney is committed to appointing conservative justices, if he has not always been the best example of small government himself in the past.
Jean-Jacques Zambrowski, again, it brings us back to the issue of, was there another way to get Americans, all of them, covered by health care?
From us who observe the American situation and who often go to the United States, there is a real different view over the question, the crucial issue of what is individual and what is belonging to the society as a whole. All over Europe, there has been for centuries a consensus that many things should be mutualized. We don't say socialized, but maybe mutualized, like equal access to education or to care. Or even, when someone has no work, some allowances to have a decent level of life every day, even without a job. Now, the American society is a younger society based on a more individual performance. If you need a job, go where there is a job for you. If you need for healthcare, just pay for your healthcare.
And that's hard to explain to French people.
This is unbelievable to French people, but on the contrary, what we have here is ununderstandable to many American people. And this is a real difference of perception, of conception. To us, it is unbelievable that 46 million in the wealthiest country of the world have no way to cover for the healthcare. And you mentioned this case of this young lady who died, not from her disease, but from being unable to access an ordinary level of care for a disease that has treatments. And we all know dozens of stories like that every day. To us, all over Europe, and especially in France, but not only, this is just unbelievable. It can be the case in Ghana or in some other poor country, but not in the wealthiest country in the world. But this is how the American society was built. And this is, in my opinion, what explains the reluctance of so many Americans, including the potential people who will benefit from such a law, to follow this new track, because there might have been another conception, but it needs a lot of education, pedagogy, a lot of communication, which is very difficult to be performed.
So for Salonia, by this ruling, does the United States become a little bit more like Europe?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're very much headed in a good direction. This, where we could have gone, is a return to a jurisprudence that existed back in the 1920s and 30s, where the Supreme Court had ruled, for example, that it was an infringement on the liberty of workers if they couldn't choose to work more than 60 hours a week. But that's ridiculous, of course. Prohibitions and limitations on the hours that workers can work protect them where they don't have a choice about the jobs that are available to them. No one chooses to get sick in the same way. No one chooses to have a sick child. And so I think here we have a democratic victory with Obama and the Congress that was elected with him choosing to put in place this historic legislation in the United States. And we have the Supreme Court vindicating that decision. So it's really a wonderful victory. We don't know what the future will bring, but I think we can all bask for the moment in what's really a great development in the U.S.
And as Josh Krashauer was saying, the polls will tell us in the coming days. The Real Clear Politics showing its latest map there. The states you see in red are the ones that are leaning towards Mitt Romney, the ones in blue towards Barack Obama. Of course, the blue ones are a little bit more populous, and there's a whole heap of gray ones that are too close to call at this point. Josh Krashauer, I guess two questions in one. Do you feel more like a European today? And do you think it's going to change the colors on that map, this decision?
Well, I think there's still a long way to go, and I think the results of the 2012 election are going to really decide how much of there's still going to be political legislative attempts to, if not repeal the law, to change and alter it in a way Republicans like more. One of the things about the public opinion that's very telling, and I think might be interesting to the European audience, is the voters who are most who would benefit the most, arguably, or the most working class, the lower middle class voters, are the most against the healthcare law. The ones who it's supposed to benefit the most are generally the voters that oppose it the most. It's usually the wealthier voters, or a lot of the Democratic base of wealthier, more upscale voters are the ones who are supporting the legislation in greater numbers. So you have this divide in the United States where a lot of working class voters are increasingly going to the Republican Party for a whole host of reasons. So this healthcare law, even though it's intended to help the middle working class types of voters, they've been moving more toward the Republican Party, and then they helped lead in 2010 when Republicans took back of Congress. It was on the heels of those types of voters. So that's what makes the politics of this very tricky for the White House, and why I don't, why I think it is going to be a big issue in the 2012 elections. And I think there's still a lot more chapters to this story to be written.
Kate Kushner, your reaction when you look at that map and you look at today's ruling?
Well, the map, it's a close election. This is clearly a victory for the Democrats, no matter what spin you want to put on it in the short term. But I think, in the long term, it may go the other way, in the sense that, right now, America does not have socialized medicine the way a lot of other countries do, but we do have a level of government involvement in the medical industry, in the healthcare industry, that is comparable. The American government spending as a percent of GDP is comparable to many Western European countries, and people are not very pleased with the results. For every story you have about people being in trouble because they don't have health insurance, you have horrible nightmares stories about people caught in the government healthcare system, people at VA hospitals, people on Medicare and Medicaid that have equally terrible things happen to them. And I think as the web of government involvement in the health industry in the U.S. Extends, I'm afraid it will continue its poor track record, and that will change people's minds about things. All
right, so the Americans not good at bureaucracy, and that could be a factor in the fall. I want to thank you, Kate Kushner. I want to thank Forrest Alogna for joining us, Jean-Jacques Zambrovski for being with us, and Josh Krashauer for being with us from Washington, D.C. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it may have been a good day for Barack Obama. It was not a good day for Bob Diamond, the boss at Barclays Bank. Marcus Carlson will be along to tell you why in business.
Live from our studio, a debate on the subject of the day with experts, newsmakers and observers. Political or economical affairs, questioning society. Join us for analysis and in-depth talk. The Debate, Monday to Thursday, 7 p.m. Paris time on France 24. Follow Euro 2012 on France24.com, featuring live match results, all the rankings and our expert analysis. France24.com is the ultimate interactive online resource. All the information you need about Euro 2012 on France24.com.
Join us on France 24 for all the latest news on the 18th edition of the African Athletics Championships. With only 1 month to go before the London Olympics, stars from all over Africa are here in Benin's capital, Porto Novo. One last major competition and a real fitness test for the continent's best athletes.
The African Championships in Athletics, today, 8:10 p.m. Paris time on France 24.